The Inuit people's survival in the harsh Arctic climate isn't just about having warm clothes and good hunting skills, it's about being weather smart without fancy gadgets. While most of us frantically check our phones every morning to see if we need an umbrella, the Inuit have spent generations mastering the art of reading nature's own weather app. I learned this firsthand when my weather app once promised a sunny day, only to leave me drenched in a surprise downpour. If only I had known what the Inuit have known for thousands of years. And that knowledge didn't come easily. It was born out of sheer necessity. When you live in a place where temperatures can drop faster than a teenager's phone battery and storms can appear quicker than gossip spreads in a small town, being able to predict the weather isn't just a skill, it's a matter of survival. Fun fact, traditional Inuit weather forecasting has shown to be accurate about 85% of the time, which is pretty impressive considering modern weather forecasts are only right about 80% of the time within a 5-day window. This knowledge didn't come from textbooks or YouTube tutorials. It was passed down through generations, refined through countless observations and probably quite a few learning experiences, which is a nice way of saying that time great-grandpa predicted sunshine and got caught in a blizzard. The Inuit developed these skills over thousands of years, carefully observing patterns that most of us would miss while trying to get the perfect selfie angle. Speaking of predictions, one of the first things the Inuit learned to master was reading the behavior of Arctic animals. Because let's face it, animals don't need meteorology degrees to know when a storm is brewing. And why would they? These furry meteorologists actually know what they're doing. The Inuit, keen observers of nature, have spent centuries watching these animals and have cracked the code on their weather-predicting behaviors. In fact, different animals give away different weather clues. Take seabirds, for instance. When they start flying inland, it's not because they're tired of seafood, though who could blame them? But they're actually running away from incoming storms, sometimes up to 24 hours before we'd see any signs of bad weather. Research has shown that seabirds can detect changes in barometric pressure that humans can't even notice without fancy equipment. Arctic foxes are particularly interesting weather forecasters. When they start digging deeper dens and gathering extra food, it's usually a sign that heavy snow is on the way. It's like they have a built-in weather radar. And get this, studies have found that Arctic foxes start these preparations an average of 3 to 4 days before major storms. That's more reliable than my local weather person, who still seems surprised when it rains even after predicting it. But my personal favorite weather predictors are the caribou. These guys are like the drama queens of the Arctic. When bad weather approaches, they start acting like teenagers who've lost their phone signal. They get super restless, stop eating, and start moving around in circles. The Inuit noticed that when caribou start pointing their noses into the wind and refuse to settle down, you can bet your last snowball that a storm is brewing within the next 12 hours. Seals are another fascinating example. When they start climbing onto ice floes in large numbers, it's not because they're having a pool party. They're actually seeking higher ground before a storm hits. The Inuit have documented that seals will typically do this about 8 to 10 hours before a major weather event. That's pretty impressive for animals that spend most of their time playing in the water. There's even a funny saying among the Inuit that goes something like, "When the lemmings build thick walls, even the teenager must pack extra socks." It's their way of saying that when small animals start preparing for harsh weather, humans better follow suit. Because unlike us, these creatures never forget to check their weather app. But while animal behavior is incredibly reliable for weather prediction, the Inuit don't just rely on their furry forecasters, they also keep a close eye on what's happening up in the sky, where the clouds tell their own unique weather stories. Because of course, looking up at Arctic clouds isn't exactly like lying on your back finding shapes that look like bunnies or dinosaurs, though I bet some Inuit kids do that too. Their cloud reading system is far more sophisticated than my childhood hobby of spotting cloud dragons. The Inuit have developed their own unique classifications for clouds, and each type tells a different weather story. Take Pikaluyak clouds, for example. These are the thin, wispy ones that look like someone took a giant comb to the sky. When these clouds start rolling in from the west, the Inuit know they have about 24 to 36 hours before a serious snowstorm hits. That's enough time to finish your outdoor chores, unless you're as slow as my cousin Mike, who once took 3 days to shovel his driveway. The real weather-telling superstars are what the Inuit call upsick clouds, dark, heavy ones that hang super low in the sky. These clouds are about as subtle as a polar bear at a penguin party. When they show up, you've got maybe 2 to 3 hours tops before the weather turns nasty. Fun fact, these clouds typically form at altitudes between 1,000 to 2,000 feet, which is much lower than regular storm clouds that hang out at around 6,500 feet. But the Inuit don't just look at individual clouds, they watch how clouds interact with each other. When high clouds move one way and low clouds go another, they call this kimikuak. It's like watching a weather dance-off. This cloud tango usually means big temperature changes are coming, often dropping by 20 degrees or more within hours. Makes my complaints about a 5-degree change seem pretty silly, right? The morning clouds have their own special meaning too. There's an old Inuit saying that translates roughly to "red clouds in morning make elders yawn," which basically means get ready for some serious wind. Modern meteorology has actually backed this up, showing that morning red clouds indicate high-pressure systems colliding with incoming low-pressure systems, creating perfect conditions for strong winds. One of my favorite cloud indicators is what they call tunuit, clouds that seem to stack on top of each other like a tower of pancakes. When these show up, which happens about 15 to 20 times per year in the Arctic, the Inuit know they're in for some wild weather. We're talking about a 90% chance of precipitation within 12 hours, usually starting with snow and ending with rain, or vice versa. It's like the sky can't make up its mind, kind of like me at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Speaking of things that can't make up their mind, the wind patterns in the Arctic are another crucial piece of the weather predicting puzzle. And trust me, these winds have more mood swings than a teenager during exam week. The Inuit, however, have turned this unpredictability into an art form. They've mastered the skill of reading these shifty breezes using some pretty mind-blowing methods. Did you know that in some parts of the Arctic, wind directions can change up to 12 times in a single day? That's more direction changes than I make when trying to parallel park. The Inuit have identified 8 main wind patterns, each with its own name and personality. The Wangnak, west wind, is like that friend who always brings snacks to the party. It usually carries moisture and warmer temperatures. Then there's Nijik, the east wind, which is more like that one relative who shows up unannounced and messes up all your plans. When this wind kicks up, the Inuit know they've got about 48 hours before a major storm system moves in. Here's a stat for you. Arctic winds can go from a gentle 5 miles per hour breeze to a whopping 60 miles per hour gale in less than 30 minutes. The Inuit can predict these sudden changes by watching something most of us would totally miss: the way snow particles move across the ground. When the snow starts doing little dance moves, they call it piruktuk. It means the wind's about to throw a major tantrum. But my favorite wind prediction trick involves something super simple: spit. Yep, you read that right. The Inuit will sometimes lick their finger and hold it up, but then they'll also spit a tiny bit and watch how the droplet moves. The direction and speed tell them what kind of winds are coming. Scientists later found out this actually works because saliva is sensitive to even tiny changes in air pressure and temperature. Who knew spit could be so smart? There's this hilarious old Inuit weather joke about a young hunter who ignored the wind signs. He went out hunting despite the north wind called Tunnik picking up. The joke ends with him coming back home with his hair frozen straight up, looking like what they call a surprised seal. The elders still tell this story to remind kids that the wind's warnings are no joke, though the hairstyle apparently was. Studies have shown that traditional Inuit wind prediction methods are accurate about 82% of the time for forecasting weather changes within 24 hours. That's nearly as accurate as modern weather stations, which average about 84% accuracy. Not bad for methods that don't need batteries or Wi-Fi. But the Inuit skills go even further. They can predict long-term seasonal changes just by studying wind patterns over a few weeks. For example, if the Kananak, or the northeasterly wind, dominates for more than 5 days straight in early spring, they know the summer will come late that year. Modern meteorologists only figured this out in the 1990s, but the Inuit have known it for generations. They call it the breath pattern of the seasons, which is way more poetic than seasonal wind velocity variations, if you ask me. But while the winds might tell us what's coming tomorrow, the Inuit know that the real light show happens up in the sky. Between the northern lights and those weird rings around the moon, the Arctic sky puts on a better performance than any weather forecast I've ever seen. The northern lights aren't just nature's version of a disco ball, they're actually a pretty reliable weather forecasting tool. When these lights dance across the sky in a particular pattern, which they call it aksarnik, they're basically sending out a party invitation for a storm that's coming in about 48 hours. It's like getting a save the date, except instead of a wedding, you're preparing for a blizzard. My favorite story about celestial weather prediction comes from an Inuit elder who once told me about his grandfather's biggest weather forecasting mistake. He saw a ring around the moon, they call it kaigulak, and confidently announced perfect hunting weather for the next day. Turns out he was looking at his foggy glasses. But here's the thing. When there really is a ring around the moon, it's right about the weather 76% of the time. The size of the ring matters too. The bigger the ring, the sooner the weather will change. A ring with a radius of 22 degrees means precipitation within 24 hours. The color of the northern lights plays a huge role too. When they're predominantly red, which happens in about 18% of aurora displays, the Inuit know they're in for some seriously cold weather. Green auroras, on the other hand, often signal milder temperatures ahead. Scientists recently figured out why this works. It's all about the different gas particles in the atmosphere that create these colors and how they relate to incoming weather systems. The Inuit figured this out centuries ago just by watching the sky. There's also this wild phenomenon called sundogs, bright spots that appear on either side of the sun. The Inuit have this funny saying about them. When the sun brings its puppies, bundle up or become a popsicle. Modern meteorology confirms that sundogs appear when there are ice crystals in the air, usually indicating an incoming cold front. They show up about 100 times a year in the Arctic, giving plenty of opportunities for weather prediction. The stars play their part too. The Inuit noticed that when stars seem to dance or twinkle more than usual, it means the air pressure is changing. The scientific explanation? Atmospheric turbulence caused by colliding pressure systems makes stars appear to twinkle more intensely. But I like the Inuit explanation better. They say it's because the stars are shivering from the cold that's coming. One particularly fascinating pattern they've identified is what happens when the northern lights, a moon ring, and twinkling stars all occur within the same night. This rare triple threat, happening maybe 3 to 4 times per year, almost always means a major storm system is brewing within 72 hours. It's like the sky's version of a 3-alarm fire warning. Speaking of warnings, while the sky might tell us what's coming from above, there's a whole other set of clues right under our feet. From the crunch of snow to the way ice forms on lakes, nature's got more weather hints than a detective novel has clues. When the Inuit have discovered that everything from plants to ice formations has something to say about upcoming weather. Last winter, I tried reading these signs myself and ended up predicting a sunny day when a snowstorm was coming. My Inuit friend just laughed and said, "You're reading nature's signals about as well as my teenager reads the room." The way ice forms on lakes and seas is particularly telling. When sea ice develops what the Inuit call spicules, tiny spiky formations on the surface, it means a warm spell is coming. These spicules show up in about 60% of pre-warming cases, making them more reliable than my old weatherman. Even more impressive, the Inuit can tell how long the warm spell will last by the size of these spikes. Every centimeter in height roughly equals a day of warmer weather. Plants are surprisingly chatty about weather too. Arctic willows, for example, drop their seed pods earlier than usual when a harsh winter is coming. Research has shown this early seed drop happens about 2 to 3 weeks before temperatures take a serious nosedive. The Inuit noticed this centuries ago, while scientists only confirmed it in 2008. Talk about being ahead of the curve. Let me give you a statistics combining all these natural indicators: ice patterns, plant behavior, and sea conditions. The Inuit can predict seasonal changes with an accuracy rate of around 87%. That's better than most long-term weather forecasts made by modern meteorologists, which hover around 82% accuracy for seasonal predictions. Not too shabby for methods that don't require satellite data or computer models. But my personal favorite has to be the sea foam predictions. When Arctic seas produce unusually thick foam, which happens when water temperature and salinity hit specific levels, the Inuit know that calm weather is coming. The thicker the foam, the longer the calm period. One elder told me, "When the sea makes a latte, the weather takes a nap." Scientific studies now show that seafoam thickness is indeed linked to atmospheric pressure stability, nature's very own barometer. But while these visible signs are great and all, the real weather predicting magic happens when you close your eyes and just listen. Because in the Arctic, every creek, crack, and whisper has a weather story to tell. It's actually a symphony of weather predicting sounds. The Inuit can tell what's coming just by listening to the different noises around them. It's kind of like having Spotify for weather forecasting, except instead of music genres, you're picking up nature's weather playlist. The cracking sounds of ice tell different stories depending on their pitch and frequency. Deep booming cracks that sound like someone dropped a giant ice cube in their drink, but way louder. Usually it means the temperature is dropping fast. Fun fact, these sounds can travel up to 10 miles across the ice, and the Inuit have identified at least 15 different types of ice sounds that predict specific weather changes. The accuracy rate, a whopping 93% when multiple sound indicators are present. My favorite sound signal has to be what the Inuit call the whisper of snow. When snow crystals are really cold and dry, they make this squeaky sound under your boots, kind of like when you're trying to sneak into the kitchen at midnight for a snack, but the floor keeps betraying you. This particular sound means the temperature is below minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit and likely to stay that way for at least a few days. The absence of sound is just as important as the sounds themselves. Remember that awkward silence at family dinners? Well, in the Arctic, sudden silence can mean a storm is coming. When birds stop chirping and the wind dies down completely, the Inuit know they've got about 2 to 3 hours before all hell breaks loose. Scientists later discovered this happens because animals can sense the rapid drop in air pressure that comes before a storm. And there's this great story about an Inuit hunter who taught his grandson about sound prediction by making him sit still for an hour with his eyes closed. The kid kept complaining about how boring it was until he started hearing all the different sounds. Now he's known in his community as the one who hears tomorrow's weather. Although his mom still can't get him to hear when she asks him to clean his room. And here's one for the science nerds. Different wind speeds create specific sound frequencies when they pass over snowdrifts. The Inuit can identify wind speeds within about 5 miles per hour just by listening to these sounds. When researchers tested this method with sophisticated audio equipment, they found the Inuit estimates were accurate 89% of the time. All these weather forecasting methods combined help the Inuit survive and thrive in one of Earth's harshest environments. While we're all glued to our weather apps and satellite forecasts, the Inuit remind us that sometimes the best technology isn't technology at all. It's simply paying attention to nature's own warning signs and weather predicting symphony.